it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker from New York on the Agricultural Environmental Management Program, voluntary, locally led, and watershed-based process. And Jeff, I'm going to mispronounce your last name for certain sure. Jeff Eyck?
Eyck. Dutch.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Let me do a visual check with you, Jeff, and make sure your slides are on the screen.
Yes, we're good to go.
Take it away, Jeff.
Okay, you can advance off of that one. I am the coordinator for Ag Environmental Management in New York. It's our agricultural conservation program. We affectionately call it AIM. We developed it for the obvious reason of protecting the environment, but also regulations. And with that, it would be the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, Coastal Zone Management Act, our own New York State Environmental Conservation Law, which basically states no farm has the right to pollute regardless of its size. And as well, it is part of our state's non-point source water quality management strategy. Also in New York, we definitely have our share of farm neighbor conflicts to address. Next slide. New York, believe it or not, has a very diverse agricultural industry and also a very diverse set of water resources to protect. And essentially, AEM will address all types and sizes of farms. We currently have over 12,000 participants in AEM. Next slide. Next slide, we'll just address some of our core concepts, which are very similar to, I think, the group that presented earlier, but we are voluntary and confidential. Believe very strongly in it being locally led, and that's through the conservation districts and their partners. And we attempt to work with each farm within the resources and capabilities of that farm and the land that it's on. Next slide. We refer to AEM as an umbrella program, separated from the myriad of other programs. Through that, it basically is our attempt to coordinate and establish a framework for the various elements of a successful agricultural conservation program. Next slide. As an example, in New York, recently, about 4 years ago, we looked and we identified 21 agricultural conservation issues and found 19 state and federal programs that would address them in one way or another. And so we're basically attempting to coordinate all of that activity and direct the farmer to the most appropriate program, hopefully overall simplifying what's going on. It's hard for the resource professional to keep up with these programs, let alone the farmer that has many other things to worry about. That's great. We start our process off with the development of a strategic plan at the county level, coordinated by the Soil and Water District. And they're, of course, asked to bring in their partners, which, again, the traditional partners, NRCS, FSA, Extension, sometimes health and planning departments locally, and then, of course, stakeholders from various farm groups. Through that, we hopefully prioritize the watersheds, the issues within the watersheds, and also coordinate education and outreach programs. The overall concept being that we will address state and federal priorities by tackling our local issues. Next slide. As I mentioned, locally led and delivered through the Conservation District. Our goal is to get a resource professional on each farm that wants to participate. And we do this through teamwork, but often involves not only the Soil and Water District and NRCS and Extension, but also professional engineers, certified crop advisors, and farm business management specialists. Next slide. With our local county strategies and partnerships in place, essentially we want to go farm by farm and establish a framework that does the basics in terms of inventory. The farm, do an assessment. We have a set of assessment worksheets, and through that, definitely identify existing stewardship on the farm. And then develop a plan to address any issues and opportunities we find, implement that plan, and eventually evaluate the plan itself, the practices in place, and the overall program at the local level. Next slide. Our framework does include the NRCS 9-step planning process that we've, again, enhanced, I will call it, through developing additional tools, basically into a 5-tier framework. Next slide. Okay, we have developed a set of assessment worksheets that address, again, all the types of agriculture found in New York. We also have a set because of, for a geographic region, that being Long Island, because it is immensely different than the rest of the state. But these worksheets provide us a relatively quick overview of the potential issues and opportunities and provide the opportunity for prioritization. Next slide. Just an example of a worksheet, essentially if a situation is assessed low risk, number 1, with 4 being high risk, hopefully through this process, initiating change through education. Also, it helps us with a term I'll call a functional equivalent, where something may not meet a particular standard but still does not pose a resource concern, can be identified through the worksheet. And again, these can change watershed to watershed. If you're a drinking water supply worksheet, you may be working to have everyone score in the 1 range if possible, whereas in other cases 2 or 3 may be acceptable. The bottom line from here, sell the farmer on a plan. Next slide. Our third step would be developing the conservation plan. It's customized and in tune with the farm's business plan. We use a progressive component planning process in that 3A criteria you see there, essentially trying to provide a level of plan that the farm is able to implement, and then working up from there. So progressively bringing the farm along and addressing components of the plan in terms of farmstead, cropland, pasture, pest management, and nutrient management. Next slide. In terms of implementing the plan, we utilize the appropriate existing programs, state or federal. Our objective is to get conservation on the land. We don't care who pays for it. We utilize NRCS standards and our land grant university guidelines. Next slide. Evaluation is emphasized. After spending all that time in society's resources and the farmers, we want to protect those investments and help the farmer with continuous improvement. Next slide. Some of the benefits we'll get into. We have what I'll call regulatory discretion. We do not have a formal agreement with our Department of Environmental Conservation, but an AEM participant would be given the chance to correct a problem, and if there is a violation, the department will go easier on them than someone not involved in the program. Certainly there is risk reduction, there's eligibility and access to funds, programs, and services, and of course the economic benefit of participation in a conservation program. Next slide. We have had some success in the 17 or so years we've been doing this. We have 2 major municipalities maintaining their filtration avoidance. We've had a watershed removed from the 3OD list, and this AEM program is the basis of our watershed implementation plan for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. Next slide. Why things are working for us, we've had nearly 2 decades to screw up and correct and learn. It is codified in New York State law in 2001. Can again overemphasize the locally led. Farmers are much more willing to help themselves and their neighbors than they are a water body 3 states away. So bringing it back to that local level, we have a strong delivery network with the districts and a certified planner program, and we're reasonably well funded, state and local state funding. We have about an $11 million annual cost share program and provide about $3 million in technical assistance through the conservation districts. Next slide. Legislatively, AEM's been expanded to deal with issues beyond water quality, but frankly, there were no new resources with that legislation, and our existing resources have been approximately cut in half over the last 2 years. So we're sticking to the basics right now. Next slide. And this, we're just looking at what our future challenges are financially. We're administering things on a shoestring right now. Nothing we have I would call fancy. If you visit the website, everything's pretty bland and straightforward, but it does the job. Certainly, we are having some issues with data aggregation, and that's where a significant investment needs to be made. Next slide. That's really it. Just want to thank you for the time, and certainly have much more we could talk about. So if anyone's interested, feel free to give me a call or email, and our website is there at the bottom.